Actually in person, which is slightly so that's what we're going to talk about. So for the people who haven't heard any of your previous interviews before, how dare they? Shame on them. You have to say what you do.
Well, I am a working musician in the south of France. I moved out to France just over 3 years ago, just in time for COVID. I'm sure people are sick and tired of hearing about COVID, as am I.
But what we are, a pain in the neck.
Yeah, it is a pain in the head, the neck, everywhere. But now that sort of side of life, fingers crossed, is well behind us.
Well, the horsemen of the apocalypse have moved on.
Life is now very different, and I feel like sort of picking up from where I should have been when I first got out there. So there's quite a lot to talk about on that sort of front and that side of life.
So what I was interested in today, was I spoke to you about this, doing this interview, is the thing of getting gigs while you're sort of resident in a country that's not, you're the one that you're familiar with, because obviously you have to contend with French as well. I didn't say the French, but that might be the case as well. That probably might come up in a conversation. But actually dealing in a foreign language as well, I could see could be complicated, and also the rigmarole.
Yeah, you would assume that France, only being 22 miles across the channel, would be pretty much identical in terms of getting gigs and that whole gigging circuit thing. But
I'm guessing it's not.
No, it isn't. Not to any sort of detriment, but it isn't, and you have to get your head around it and be accepting of that difference. Otherwise, you are literally just banging your head against a brick wall, and you get very frustrated very quickly. So, for example, you can just walk in somewhere and ask if you can play there, just as you can in the UK. But the expectations of the owners will be very different.
Like what?
Well, for example, they may well just expect to either not pay you, but you will eat there, and they will provide food. Quite a nice sort of French meal.
As payment?
As payment.
Okay. So if you're a starving musician then? Yeah,
but
okay.
I wouldn't knock it, because I've done it, and it works. It can work quite well. Whereas here, pretty much all pubs will sort of pay you in cash, or bars in cash, or someone will write you a cheque, and it's the tax implication is down to you, and it's kind of your problem. In France, you rarely get paid in cash, and therefore you have to give an invoice, and they want to know that you are all bona fide set up to do that sort of thing. So the first inclination I had of that is when someone said, what are we going to use and use the French term, structure. I was thinking, structure? What are you talking about? I just want to get a gig in a bar. Surely there's no need for any structure. And then the next thing I heard was a member of this group had got in contact with an organisation that deals with that, and of course they would take a percentage, and I could just feel my prickles rising as to why are you going to instantly give some money away to other people, and what do you mean by structure? And surely this cannot be the case. But it's true. You need some sort of structure to receive your money. Now,
So who are these people that are acting as the intermediaries? Are they just sort of like a...
yeah, they're just companies that have been set up for that sole purpose. And to be honest, I'm still learning about that.
Right, okay, that's sort of
But
bizarre.
they do.
Isn't
It is a bit bizarre.
I'm trying to work out how they fit into what's the English equivalent of...
So for example, if you had it's like you need to give your national insurance number for yourself now, or your business number, or a registered charity number. Now, if you don't have any of that, then the people you're playing for aren't going to pay you because they've got nothing to invoice you against.
Yes.
So these other companies then, you use their number, and
I got you.
Then the venue
that's
got someone who they can.
That makes sense. Actually,
they can part with their money.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying now. So it's almost like having a registered address.
Yes.
Like
exactly
when you get, I don't know what the term is for this, when your business and you have it, the registered address is so-and-so, and it probably isn't your address, it's some other company or something. I can't remember the term for that. But anyway,
Now that's more kind of applicable for bigger gigs, and I'm not saying that nobody pays cash, and I'm not saying everybody needs that kind of setup. But as you progress through your, should we call it, gigging career in France, as money increases, as number of people performing increases, that's what you need. And if you're playing a particular music venue especially, then that's what you need.
You mentioned something about a lot of these places. There are the same little coterie of people that seem to be somewhere in, not won't say in charge, but they seem to have their fingers in the pie.
Yeah.
I can't, sort of a musical mafia.
Yes, it is. It is the music mafia.
So these, if I've got this right, they could be the people who own the radio station, who own a venue, who own something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does that work? This is quite interesting because I can't think of an example of that here.
Yeah. Okay. So this is maybe complicated. It's complicated for me to understand, let alone explain.
Right.
So you have a word in France which is the word association. So if you want to set up a club, and we'll call it a club, you set up an association, and that association will have a secretary and it will have a treasurer. And
so it sounds a bit like trustees to a charity.
It's exactly that. It's like setting up a charity or some kind of company, but it's a non-profit based.
Yeah, so it is like a charity, basically. Yeah.
And that seems to give you license, and I use the phrase, it seems to, because I'm still learning, it seems to give you a license to do a lot of things. So within that, you could employ people and pay them to do certain things. So you could have an association that runs a radio station, and you may have people working for that radio station full time. So you're paying them. The radio station is generating money, but it's not generating a profit, but it is disseminating money within it for jobs.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah.
So, but if that's if people on that or who are high up in that radio station happen to have a family member who's in another association that happen to run a venue next door.
Yes. I can see it.
Who are then related to somebody else who runs the festival.
Yeah.
Then you've got this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Whatever. Now
that sounds interesting to me.
The other thing is these associations often have funding.
Right.
So there are, I'm sure there are political aspects to it. So they must be seen to be doing X, Y, and Z with their money, which is absolutely fine. But if you are not flavour of the month, or you are not interesting, or for whatever reason, it does make the music scene appear, certainly, to be difficult to get into. And then when you learn that certain person is related to somebody else whose brother-in-law does this and is married to someone who runs a local bar, you can quite easily feel.
Do you think that the potential there? This is a bit of a rhetorical question, actually. The potential there for it to actually influence the type of music that you could hear or experience, because somebody is effectively not. I'm not saying that they're not doing the sort of BBC thing, saying this is not for the good of the people. I'm not saying it's as much as that, but by inference, certain types of music will get through, and certain type of acts will get through, where others will be screened out.
Yeah, well, actually, I will hit this from a different perspective, actually, and feel free, anyone, to shoot me down in flames. So, if you imagine, like I've just said, people need to be seen to be doing certain things. So, if you've got public money, you need to be seen to be promoting acts right across the spectrum. From rock, jazz, rap, country, you name it, loads of things. And this is my opinion, but when a lot of those, and especially when it comes to festivals, I personally don't feel that some of those acts are particularly festival friendly.
No.
But
they've got to be seen to be.
But they've got to be seen to be putting that money in and showing, then you start to think, well, why are you bothering with that? Why are you bothering with this? Why? And can you not just do it on the basis of talent and how good the music is? And it does become very, and you start to argue, well, what's talent and what sort of music is best? And
So this is interesting.
I have to share my thoughts.
No, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think there's something peculiarly French about that. Whereas what we're usually used to is something peculiarly English about art, which doesn't get an awful lot of funding. So you have to sort of make do, and there's that sort of Heath Robinson thing of, trying to invent something that will create an idea and get it out there in this sort of cack-handed sort of way. You mentioned this about the comparison between the British Army and the Americans, where the Americans can just go like, oh, we need so-and-so, and they'll ship it in.
Yeah.
Whereas the British Army sort of has to work out how they can hammer this together with that. And then
or borrow it or steal it or someone else.
Yeah, go down the local flea market and buy some armour. Yeah, that type of thing. I see that, if you think about that sort of make-do thing that goes on with British music, and it is like that, where it's a little bit like, people rehearsing in the garage type of thing, and then deciding it's a good idea to record in the garage type of attitude, which maybe isn't the sort of thing that is so... It's an attitude, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, there's something
Does that make sense?
I need to touch on as well. So, culture in France is much more important to the French public and the government.
Yes,
than
that's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, than it is in England.
Yes.
To the point where you can be registered as a professional musician, and I've forgotten the phrase that.
Lay it out.
Called no. So you register as a professional musician, and as long as you do X number of gigs per year, your money is guaranteed.
Oh, now that's pretty good, isn't it?
Well, it does sound good, but it doesn't mean that your money is particularly good.
No.
It just means that you can sort of drive around saying I'm a professional musician, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
And I have met quite a few of these people, and their playing ability or performing ability is not in question at all. They can all play, they can all perform. That's not a problem. However, it's not something I would choose to do, because it doesn't mean they're particularly successful either. It seems to be just a bit of a label, a romantic idea
Yes.
that I am. It's, it'd be the same within acting. If you were, you can call yourself an actor, a thespian, and you do X amount of plays, etc., and shows per year. You're still a bumbling actor. You're not earning a lot of money.
But the thing is, don't you think that affects your ability to create? Because I think it does. I think that is this sort of like, Frank Zappa's term, the mothers of invention. It's sort of necessity is the mother of invention. If you've got to do something, or you're doing it because it's not because you can get some safe little thing going with the state, but you are able to, in spite of the situation, create music. And I think the good example of this is Britain in the 70s and early 80s, when before Thatcher stopped the dole money being able to go out to artists. Basically, they were unemployed, but they were using that time to create music.
Yeah.
And in a way, you could sort of go, well, that's the same sort of thing that the French have got going, but it's sort of not really, because you weren't a musician. It was just you were out of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And out of all of that, you've got these incredible artists, that appeared in that period, whether they were from the world of music or the world of art. Because these people were living in squats and all the rest of it, and taking dole money, and in that period of time, they honed their skills. Now, the problem with it being sanctioned, I can see that being, as you say, not necessarily the best way forward. And maybe what you said about it being an important thing to the French, the French government, it's obviously culture's not something that figures very highly on the political agenda here for whatever lip service they pay. I mean, it's obviously not, because they don't fund it properly, and they never have done.
No.
I'm just wondering if, weirdly, that might be, detrimental for the French in some respects.
I think, if you use COVID as an example, it was good in terms of there's a whole cohort of musical people who had gigs just taken away from them. Their teaching or the ability to teach was removed, etc. But because they were registered in this format, they got their money.
Yeah.
So they survive, and then therefore the culture survives. So when you come out of COVID, you still have people that can then straight away go out and play, and more importantly, you've got people that can go out and educate the next generation.
Yeah. That's a good.
Yeah. So it's really positive.
But the thing that you're saying, because what small experience I've had watching the sort of French music scene from the grassroots level when we did something together years and years ago, was how pretty boring it was.
Because
that was that's a little bit.
On the
France is a bloody big country, but we only were seeing things, but a small snippet of it. But that was the attitude that certainly Dan had about it, who was the one who was hosting it. That actually it's disappointing.
Yeah, because on the back end of what I've just said is the same people have to go and do those gigs.
Yes.
So they have to accept all sorts.
Yes.
And that's what they have to do. And so their time for real, genuine creativity and hard work to.
I'm just wondering also whether that stops people taking risks.
I think it becomes it can become quite a, I don't know, I wouldn't like to say it becomes a comfortable situation, because we're not talking about some sort of luxury lifestyle being funded by the state.
No. But the thing is, the risk is taken away, isn't it? Because you can still survive.
You can still survive.
So it doesn't cover the drugs, but unless there isn't. There's always plenty of wine though.
Yeah, there is plenty of wine. So, but that's an aspect that is completely different.
We probably don't have many people from France listening, so there's only a few that I know of. So.
Well, I will soon know.
And he's an Irishman anyway, so
my phone will be buzzing.
Well, we just don't tell them.
Yeah. So
just blame me.
that's a big difference between France and England is that sort of setup.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know whether it's it's a good thing to a certain degree, but I also see a lot of quite talented individuals having to play a load of rubbish at the end of the week just to meet the criteria of doing some sort of gig.
That's fascinating. It really is fascinating.
But the playing for dinner is actually quite good. You can go to a restaurant and you can literally say, I'm happy to come and play for a couple of hours if I can have a decent dinner at the end of it.
Which is another thing actually, because often when you play in this country, they don't get the idea about feeding a band. You end up with a couple of shriveled up old sandwiches and a packet of crisps.
If you're lucky.
So that's another.
To eat next to the toilet where you're playing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've all had all of that. Well, not in the toilet, but next to the toilet.
You do tend to get looked after a little bit more, or quite a lot more. So I did a gig. How long ago now? Just it was last Thursday night, and there's an empty hall next to where we were playing, and in there was some chairs all laid out and a table and some fruit and some sponges to eat, sort of finger food, and then for the girls in the group there was a table with a mirror all ready to go for makeup. And
well, not for the guys. That's
not for the guys. No.
Oh my God, that wouldn't go down very well in Brighton.
That's an outrage. There's 3-course meal all prepared as well, and that's part of it. Plus, got paid as well, but via a structure.
Yeah.
So it had to be invoiced.
That's good. That is good.
So that's pretty good. You do get the thought of getting looked after is much.
Yeah. You're not changing in the back of a broom cupboard.
No, not at all. So
well, that's fascinating, actually. Now, another question is, what about the mayor?
The mayor.
Because if somebody said to you in this country about getting a gig you have to go and see the mayor. You think, I don't even know who the bloody mayor is, do you? Right. Of course, it's a different beast in France, isn't it?
It is, but I would say that's at the moment for me it's a big positive. It's a huge positive. So for the people listening, I live in a village of about 400 people. The mayor happens to live 2 doors down, and if I use the phrase hearts and minds, it's all about hearts and minds. As we all know, what you want to get out of life, you have to. It's all about personal communication. Unfortunate enough that years ago the mayor's daughter-in-law rented my house before I moved to France. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't realise actually she was his daughter-in-law. When I then moved to France, I had to get a permit to renovate a barn in order to turn it into a studio and an additional accommodation. Went to see the mayor. He was very understanding. He listened to the plans and he granted the permit there and then, as long as we had some drawings done and a few little things fell into place. It's very good. So I've always been above board with the mayor, and very recently, and this isn't a plug for Bluescamp, but it is as well, but I'll use it as an example.
Shameless plug. Go for it.
I wanted to get the catering for Bluescamp out of my house. I wanted to see if that was possible, and in the village there is basically a restaurant that is an association. You would have heard that word already. So it's empty unless it gets booked by another association to use as, say, a function room. It's got a fully equipped kitchen. It will cater up to 100 people. It's got a bar in it, and it's all good to go. So I asked him if I could use that for a week, how much it would cost, etc. And within about 16 hours, I had an email saying, "Yeah, not a problem. We've penciled you in for these dates. It's affordable." Blah blah blah. So my relationship with the mayor of my village is extremely positive. There are 2 other villages or 3 other villages that I work in where each mayor grants me almost free use of a room in order to teach kids and adults after the sort of working day was ended. Now, it's important. Obviously, it's important for me because it provides me with income, but it's also important for those villages because it's quite a rural area. And if your mayor is not seen to be doing things for the people that live in your village, as in attract teachers, attract people to run clubs, then he's not going to be elected next time around. So it's very sort of quid pro quo. But they call me and they let me know when there's problems or rooms aren't available or they found another room because there was an event on. I can speak to them about. I've got all their home phone numbers, and it's all very, very nice as long as you're upfront with them. And
do you think that's because obviously France is a massive place, isn't it? It's not like here. It's not, and there are lots of very, very sparsely populated areas in France. You're saying there's a village of 400 people. I mean, I can't think of many places with only 400 people in it.
No, it does make, let's say, Detling look quite big.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There are places you sort of think, well, that's, shouldn't even be on the map. I'm not saying Detling shouldn't be on the map, but you know what I mean. But they are, considerably bigger. So maybe there's that. Yeah,
there is that. And people realise that, the nearest big, good-sized town is a good 30 minutes away by car for all of these villages. There isn't the time to go and finish your daily job, come home, and then get in the car, drive for 30 minutes, do a club, and then drive another 30 minutes to come home. You need to attract people to come to the villages to put things on. Hence, you have this building that we're going to use.
So that's a definite plus, isn't it? Because I mean, here everything's pretty close.
Yeah, now outrageous money. I can't
oh
imagine
my God.
Going to the local local village hall and saying I want to use the village hall for a whole week.
Yeah, but also what people are paying for things. Because obviously, I used to, as you know, used to teach at a couple of independent schools, and you sort of look at the cost of bringing up a child here. Okay, you factor in. So you've got somebody going to a public school, and I don't even know how much the fees are now, but it's not cheap, is it?
No, not at all.
So let's say it's 30 grand a year, something like that. And so 30 grand a year, that's a lot of money to start with, isn't it, for one child?
Yeah.
And then you factor in that there might be more than one child, but let's just say there is one child. And of course, then there's all the extras, like if they stay after school, if they've got the club and the trip to the wherever it is they're going to go on the hockey tour and all the rest of it, right? But then they've got the expensive car, not just one, but they've got two expensive cars, and then the house, maybe another house somewhere else. You start looking at this, thinking, you don't have to earn an incredible amount of money, even just to sort of fall into line with somebody else. Okay, maybe there are lots of other things factoring in.
Yeah.
But you sort of think, well, if you lived in a little village like that in France, I'm sure they're not spending, the cost of living can't be.
Yeah. No. It's much. I mean, it's not cheap. It's expensive. Just being rural makes travelling around expensive. But the villages are more, shall we say, self-aware.
Exactly.
Of those issues.
Exactly. And food production, I would have thought, in France, you can get most things, can you? Not this.
Well, if it moves, it tends to get put into a tin at some point,
and
you eat it.
Mind you, I won't say that. I was going to say that. Anyway, don't worry. Keep talking.
But there's a lot of local produce. A lot of people grow a lot in their gardens.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It is just different. People do. They make the benefit of the better weather.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's, I think, apart from me, has got stacks of tomatoes, potatoes, rhubarb, courgettes. You name it, all in the garden.
Mind you can grow. In this country,
you can, but the land. Again, people's houses are different there. There isn't a shortage of land.
No.
So if you buy a house, you get a massive garden, just happens to come with it.
Yes.
Where you can put your chickens, which everyone has. So
once you've got your chickens, then at least you've got some decent fertilised ground to grow your plants.
So you plant,
So it's all a bit like...
All links together.
It certainly does. I mean, here you just got to buy a load of compost to do anything, because Brilliant, starved.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our agricultural part there for people interested in gardening. We don't normally go into that, but that's another. Yeah. So what do you? I know. Let's talk about blues. You mentioned Bluescamp. Let's talk about that because you've got the French.
Yeah,
you've got the French version.
The getting gigs. So we can link that to getting gigs.
Tell the people how you do that version because it's great fun.
Okay,
right.
So the whole premise is about music and doing it for real. So coming to France, going somewhere different country, language, etc., and actually playing to gigs to a real audience that are the general public. So they're not people you know, they're not your mates, they don't come around and just have a barbecue with you in the garden. You go to a venue and you play to people that have never seen you before. So that creates quite a bit of pressure, but that's real life. That's what you have to do, and that's what you have to manage, and that's what you practice to overcome in both the musical aspect and the staging and all the logistical side of it as well. So if you came to France to do Bluescamp, that is what you would do. I'm fortunate now to have been linked into a festival in Mont-de-Marsan, which is called the Fête de Madeleine, which is a huge festival based in an urban environment, so it's spread out amongst the town. And I'm lucky enough now to have been not given a venue, but to have been given some slots within a big outdoor venue to fill with musicians to play their material. I have there's a remit that the material shouldn't be of any extreme. It should be super loud death metal, and it shouldn't be
So here we go. This goes back to that. Yeah, that's an interesting point. That goes to that thing what I was saying about how much does that influence the sort of music. But anyway, as it's a
general pop rock, shall we say? That's what they want. They want a general pop rock, bunch of covers, originals. It doesn't matter. Set, and with that you get a stage that's built on scaffold, decent PA. This year, there was monitors all along the stage, 5 different mixes, front of house with his Midas digital mixer, your engineer.
So basically in one show, really good gear for people who don't understand
really good gear,
systems,
lighting, all that stuff, all looked after. And you got, like I just said about being looked after, you got looked after at the event. You could drink what you want. There's plenty of food all the time. You're at the particular venue, and then when you're not playing, you've got the rest of the festival to go and have a look around. And for a town that has a population of 35,000 normally, so it's not the most massive of towns, but it is a proper town. That population trebles during this week. So. There's some big events, big stages, thousands of people are having a really good time.
That's great.
So so it's really good. And then don't just play there. Look at other venues as well. So this year's band went off to the coast and played at a campsite, which doesn't sound, I would say, overly glamorous, but this campsite was pretty good. It was right next to the pool.
A bit different from a British campsite. Yeah,
right next to an enormous swimming pool on the coast in the middle of the pine forest. In front of a bar. Again, plenty of food, drink. Yeah, it's really, really nice, and a different kind of audience, and just gives you all that experience.
As you said, the playing was intense.
It was intense. Yeah, it's very intense. All that experience you need to progress in terms of entertaining. And what was interesting this time is that the bigger venue for the Fête de Madeleine meant that, whereas if you're just playing in a bar, you can sort of insert, we'll just have a slow song here, and we'll do this there, and then it doesn't really matter if people can see us or not, because the bar is so small you can't sort of see around corners and there's pillars in the way. When you're playing on a big stage in front of the whole of the bar, when everyone is at the bar, plus a load of I think there was 80 odd tables to the side, and there's quite a few hundred people there. You have to have some sort of presence on the stage. So we start to talk about and look at and teach and learn about actually moving on the stage and being entertaining visually, rather than just being what is basically, you know, what could be a CD going into a machine.
Yeah, well, that's, you know,
and it takes everything to a whole nother level.
Well, we've always said that in
Yeah.
Bluescampuk. It's actually, you know, it's what the audience see, because for the most part, most people in the audience have not the faintest idea what's going on.
No.
You know, in fact, to the point that they can hear certain sounds from an instrument and not know what instrument that comes from.
Yeah.
And, you know, as musicians, you think, well, that can't be possible. You know, so must know that. Everybody must know what a bass guitar. People don't. People don't. So the point is, what is it that people are experiencing when they're listening to the music? You know, so you've got to think about, you know, how that music sort of grooves and communicates with an audience, and what you look like. Because if you don't look interesting, then you look boring or rubbish.
Yeah,
you know?
and you'll have no one dancing in front of you.
No.
To the point where, I mean, you get a lot of guitarists who need to detune for a particular song. You cannot have a pregnant pause of X amount of minutes while someone's faffing around with leads, detuning with, you know, and trying to sort out a tuner whilst everyone else is sort of waiting around. You have to manage that, or you have to think of something else, or the drummer has to do a bit of a solo, and it's all right talking about it, but it's a whole different thing when you've got to do it for real.
And also practicing it in such a way that it looks completely,
so no one knows that
it
you're
looks
doing it.
natural, instead of it looks like you've worked at that bit. I mean, you know, that's one of those. Again, you know, this year particularly we did a lot of stuff about professionalism. Well, it wasn't about professionalism, but that's basically what it was. I mean, we never said that. It's just that sort of thing about how you make the set of songs seamless.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things have really got nothing to do with the actual song itself. You know, how you link songs together.
Yeah.
You know, you fit this bit in there, or what is it that somebody says at that moment, or whatever. How does this guitarist, as you say, change guitars? You know, could that be possible that they change the instrument before the end of that song while somebody comes?
Yeah.
But it should be seamless.
Yeah, and you'll see. I can use the Rolling Stones as an example.
Yes.
You think that, you know, a band that's been playing for that long just goes on and does that sort of stuff without even thinking about it. But what you don't realise is people like Mick Jagger hire out a dance studio, and he will have backing tracks, and he will rehearse what he's doing and all his little dance moves and the quirks and things, and, you know, everything that makes Mick Jagger look like Mick Jagger. He'll be rehearsing it in front of a mirror for weeks on end before he goes out on tour.
Absolutely.
And all the big bands, that's what they do. You've got this big area to play on, big stage. You've got to know what to do.
You know, Keith Richards changes his guitar. I won't say every song, but it's not far off it. But he doesn't go and get the guitar. So he comes on with the guitar, and it's changed like that, bang, you know, it's ready to go. Whatever tuning it's in, and all the rest of it. He's not messing around. But just that, well, you know, when I first met you, I was playing in a band that we'd really honed that side of things down. And I didn't realise actually how important that was at the time, because we just had a really good manager who said, look, you know, you've got to make the performance slick.
Yeah.
And one of the, and obviously I do this a lot with my own people, so get people to, when they're playing with a group of people, actually go up to somebody and say, right, you stop playing, and then see what happens to the rest of the band.
Yeah.
Because if your lead broke, you would literally just stop playing because nobody would be able to hear you. And then you've got to work out what the problem is. So they have to wait for a few moments, and then you go, okay, change guitar lead. Right? And then they've got to work out how to change the guitar lead without the amp going bang and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, and for it to then practice that, to make that look, well, people don't even notice it. actually. But the rest of the band have to cover. And it might be that, of course, the cue for the next thing is coming from the guitar. So, so if you're not used to playing in a band, it wouldn't even occur to you that those things have to be rehearsed. But they have to be rehearsed in such a way that they're seamless.
Yeah, and when they happen, you have to be relaxed.
Yes.
Because you can see the look of fear on musicians' faces sometimes. What do I do now?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
like, wow,
exactly. But of course,
rehearsals,
this is something we've never mentioned before, but I'm sure if anybody plays music, they know this. Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, it will. And that sort of attitude that if you haven't got a spare lead, or you haven't got a spare guitar, or you haven't got a spare amp, or something that will go when your amp goes down, it will go wrong. It's like having a lucky charm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your spare amp and your spare guitar and your spare lead is a lucky charm. If you've got those, nothing will go wrong.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got them, it will.
Yeah.
And that is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely.
And people never think of that. But all those things that go wrong, and knowing what that checklist is about if an instrument stops working, what do I check first? Because there are obvious things. So once you've got that happening with the band, which obviously you're working with those people to do that, and it is a revelation to people, isn't it, when they start.
Yeah, straight off the back of that, the band who I mentioned, they're called the Gaggle, and they were formed via Bluescamp, and they're still going strong a number of years later, and they will be back in France next year as well. They're kind of experimenting with different ways to set up on stage, and at the moment they aren't using any amps. They DI straight into whatever desk they're using, and then they go from there, because they find it easier to control the sound that way. But I had to make, I was aware of that, so before we did the Fête de Madeleine this year, I contacted the sound engineer and said, have you got enough DI boxes? Because all of a sudden it's not just a bass or a keyboard, it's the whole band are going to DI in. And the lead singer plays electric and acoustic, so that's 2 DI boxes just for him. So we discussed that, and funnily enough now all the band are going to get their own DI boxes that they take with them as part of their, unfortunately it's another thing to stick in a bag, but you can't afford to get somewhere.
No.
And even with a professional PA company, when you say, well actually we need 8 DI boxes for all of us, and he goes, well blimey, I've never come across that before. You say, well, it's all right, it's not a problem because we've all got our own.
Exactly.
And it's an easy fix. And they're not expensive things to get. But yeah, that's...
So that's an interesting thing, because, from... Obviously as the technology improves and changes and all the rest of it, so does everything else. Because once you've got DIing or in-ear monitoring, or whatever, it changes the way that interaction happens on the stage, and where you're listening for the sound. Because obviously, if you're used to working with an amp, the sound's coming from behind you. Right? If you then play on a big stage, it's not necessarily coming from behind you. It could be coming from that monitor over there, or that monitor over there, and that actually can do some strange things to your head when you're playing.
Yeah, I mean,
so then we're DIing everything's coming out of that thing.
And you've got to make sure that PA company can do X amount of different mixes.
Yes.
In fact, the keyboard player said something quite revelational.
Yes.
Because he said, I can hear myself so clearly, it's putting me off. Now that's not detriment to his playing.
No.
He's just not used to.
Yes.
Like, I suppose I felt quite a little sympathy for him, because I've always felt the same way. Your ears are straining so much to hear what you're actually playing. But here it was in sort of crystal stereo at his feet. And it's like, it's a bit weird. I'm not sure if I like it or not. And it's something else to get used to.
Absolutely. That's
crazy.
That's the same thing for having like inner ear monitoring. You're hearing it differently to what you would normally do, and it's sort of weird, right? Yeah. There's a lot of other things, like for instance, this is something actually talking about, mentioned the thing about singers. Particularly for female singers, this is a problem. Unless you've got a voice like Beth Hart, you know, you would just blow everybody off the stage anyway. But generally speaking, what happens for a lot of singers is they're not loud enough, right?
Yeah.
In a mix. And they don't make a thing about making sure that they're loud enough, or the band are quiet enough for their voice to go over. So what tends to happen is they over-sing. So they're really having to belt it out in order to be heard. And of course then things happen to their voice.
Yeah.
You know, they tire quickly, they start singing out of tune. There's also things that happen for people. So that's another thing that, of course, if somebody's not used to being in a band and they're not used to being on the biggest stage and all the rest of it, these are all things that can happen along the way. And I've seen it all in time where you think, how did it sound like that in a rehearsal? They're saying like absolutely nailed it, but live they don't sing in tune.
Yeah.
And that's because of everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's that, you know, it's that sort of thing that people have got to learn how things change, like you're saying, you know, the thing with the keyboard player going, like, I can hear myself, oh my God, you know, this is weird, because it just is not what I'm used to in the sound.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a bizarre thing to say, but then when you experience it, you completely get it.
Yeah.
You feel like you're too loud and you want to start to play a little bit quieter, which is not what you want to do, because the engineer then start push you up louder.
Exactly. Again, that's the interesting thing. When you're suddenly exposed in the sound, then you start to become, you don't take chances with things, because it's like you're going to be found. This is a little bit one of these sort of themes that runs through this, about the, you know, being found out to be a fraud. You know, because I think every artist thinks that, you know, that they feel they're some sort of imposter. You know, it's all right when you're in a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But suddenly you can be heard. Oh my God! You know, because it's nonsense. Because everybody feels like that. Even some of the greatest players I've spoken to, they all feel at some point in time that they feel like they're a little bit of an imposter.
Yeah.
There's a better person down the road. You know what I mean? So all of those things are important lessons for people, aren't they? Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. So this is a bit unfair, but let's. What are the good points in French music? What's the bad points, and what's good in British music? What's the bad points?
So it's fairly. I'd say it's fairly, from my perspective, certainly in southeast England. I'd say England in general. There's just many more good musicians everywhere, because the population density is that much greater.
Not because we're English.
Not because you're English.
No,
because we are
just
English.
Stirring up trouble.
Yeah, not because
Welsh
people are more
Scots
talented or anything like that. It is just the population density is that much more. If I needed, for any reason, a drummer, I can pick up the phone, and there are many great drummers that can all do a fantastic job for whatever I needed them to do.
Yeah.
However, where I live in France, that's a bit different.
Yeah.
And therefore those couple of drummers that are very good happen to be very busy because there's no one else. So that's say musicianship wise. Lessons and learning is also sort of problematic because of distances. Here I'd say in England there's more teachers, more good teachers. It's easier to get to a good teacher generally, depending on what instrument you want to learn. But where I live in France, again the distances, because it's rural, you've got to either be prepared to travel or pay a lot of money or do more online to kind of get over that aspect. In terms of gigs, there are, I would say, more places to gig than southwest rural France. More places to gig in southeast England than rural southwest France, again population density. However, in the summer there's an awful lot of outdoor festivals, and that summer window is bigger because the weather is better in France. I would say in France, music is taken more seriously as an art form, most definitely, even experimental music. You will find people going to see a guitarist who's set up crazy things with 1,001 different pedals, playing on his own, doing something, and there'll be 100 people sat very quietly listening to every single string that is being plucked, because that's what it is. Whereas here in England,
French.
here in England, that's probably not the case. So much.
No, I don't think it would be the case. No, exactly.
So the whole thing about structure. There are one thing I haven't mentioned is there are organisations in France that are there to assist you with your band or musical performance, and I've not heard of anybody in England, apart from obviously Bluescamp, that is there to assist you with your band.
Interesting. So we're missing a trick here.
Yeah, so LMA, Landes Musique Ampli, who are a great association, bring back that word, have a huge sort of theatre complex.
Sounds like some sort of physical disorder.
No, yeah.
I have a theatre complex.
They've the band I played in, we've had a residency there twice, where you are sponsored. It's free. You go there for a number of days, and you get sort of 8 hours a day use of the theatre, the lighting, the PA. Someone will come along and critique you, etc. Then there's your meals are thrown in. There's accommodation in the evening if you want it thrown in, sort of an Airbnb accommodation they will pay for, so that you can then carry on into the next day, etc. And they call it a residency. And there's a number of places that do that. Not everywhere, and you have to be, quite reasonable to be invited to do that. But that's what they do, and that's government money.
Do you know, this is fascinating, because you look at that and you think, well, obviously, it obviously has some sort of impact, but I'm not quite sure what it is, because I'm sort of thinking about Greece, right?
Yeah.
Because the Greeks, one of the things that used to happen when I used to go out and examine for the RGT, the guitar exams, you'd have a lot of, this was in Athens, right? So you'd have a lot of kids turning up, and they were so keen, and they were fabulously good, ridiculously good for whatever level they were trying to do. And they never spoke about, when they referred to practice or whatever, practicing, it was study. That was the way, and I spoke to quite a few Greek people about this, but it's because they've always felt that the only way that they've sort of, their history is about being dominated by somebody else all the time. So their only way of getting anywhere was self-improvement. And it's there in the way that they think about art, and it's not so much that money is coming from the government particularly. I think it's all really what I might be wrong about this, but I think it's particularly to do with them. But the calibre of the musicianship is astonishing, even to the point that there's a lot of really great Greek players playing for a lot of rock bands. Right, Ozzy Osbourne's a good example, and I've got a sneaking suspicion it might not be me, but one of the RGT guys actually examined this guy for his grade 8. So, but that's the type of calibre of player. Now, I'm interested in the fact that they used to complain about the fact there was nowhere to play. There was nowhere to play. In Athens, there were just a few venues that it was possible, because the music scene in Greece was totally dominated by the tourist industry. So if you were somebody who could play the bouzouki or something, and you're quite happy to play, Zorba the Greek or something
Yeah.
in the restaurant, whatever, because it was all about tourism.
Yeah.
And it used to rankle a lot of people. I could see why. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but I could sort of see that. But there was probably had an influence on how good technically these people were, because it was sort of in their head. And some of these people could play bouzouki as well as play guitar. But you imagine, because bouzouki music's like unbelievably fast and everything. And that sort of translated directly over to these shredding guitar players.
Yeah.
So I'm quite intrigued by the fact that that limited possibility of them being able to play anywhere meant that these people travelled. So you get these Greeks who are, they're going to America to study, into Britain and all the rest of it. And suddenly it exploded, the music scene exploded. So I'm just wondering that with the French and then the amount of government support that they've got is fantastic in many, many ways. But what's the detriment? I'm just wondering. Because you're talking about, and I get what you're saying about the density of population and that you can find really good players, but there is something about the edginess of British music which seems to be quite, I won't say it's unique, because it's not unique, that's not the word, but it gives it an edge that is particularly, I don't know what the word is, whatever, British, whatever. But it doesn't matter that, you've got a band that's coming from up north or from the south or from Wales or wherever, they've all got that edge or Ireland, for goodness sake, that is, per head of population. And also talking about density of population, most of Ireland is empty, but they can still, there's this sort of extraordinary musical impact that it has beyond the country. And I might be totally wrong here, but you don't see an awful lot. Maybe in the 60s you got a lot of that from France, a lot of those musicians who impacted the world, but I don't see a massive amount of that. And I might be completely wrong.
I think, certainly southwest France is very rock orientated, but it's not the same in northern France. And what might be quite a fun experiment to do for another time is to literally have the French charts and then the English charts and maybe the American charts sat side by side and go through what's in the top 10 or top 20 and compare what sort of music, because that is quite different. And I think France can be quite regional in the types of music, whereas I think England is also regional, but maybe not to the same extent. So,
cool stuff. That's very interesting. Right, so I'll put some stuff in the show notes, right?
Okay.
And obviously, if people are interested in sort of coming out to France, it is fantastic, I must say, what you've got going. And it's not just music all the time, because you've got some downtime where people can sort of get out.
There's all that. It's all encompassing. The weather, the music, the space, the beach, the pool, the studio, the cuisine, etc. It's good. It's certainly a good experience. And like I said, the band that have literally only just come back and they've got a gig next Saturday. I've already booked to come back next year, so that's good.
Good stuff. Right, well, thanks a lot, Chris. That was really good. And see you again.
We'll speak again.
We shall.